Are you the parent of an athlete who used to be on top of their game, but you now see them struggling to overcome their fears? Fear of failing, fear of not being able to perform when it matters most in a big game, or sometimes even fearful to the point that they can't find consistency in practice. Or perhaps you're a coach, someone who got into coaching because of your passion. You love helping others grow and develop, and yes, even win. But now you're dealing with parents and athletes who aren't receptive to coaching or feedback, who would rather opt out than listen, dig deep, and put in the work to do better next time. Hello, I'm Kirsten Jones, former D1 volleyball player, 15-year Nike executive, turned motivational speaker, coach, author of the book Raising Empowered Athletes, mother of 3, and the proud host of this podcast, Raising Athletes. When I started my sports parenting journey, I found myself looking for tools and advice anywhere I could find it, not only to help me make better choices on the sidelines, as I often coached my young kids in their sport, but also as a spectator, trying to swallow my words on the dreaded car ride home. Over the last 6 years, I've interviewed dozens of coaches, athletes, authors, and professionals in the mental health and physical health world who dedicate their lives to helping young athletes. Welcome to the Raising Athletes podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's do this. Hello and welcome to the Raising Athletes podcast. My name is Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach and author of Raising Empowered Athletes and the host of this podcast that's we're now into our middle of our 8th season doing this, 8th year. I love talking to others that are in this space that I know there are lots of parents, coaches, athletes listening, trying to navigate youth sports today. And it gets more and more complicated, it feels, by the day. Today's guest is so special, navigating and seeing the explosion. I was born in 1970, so 1972, Title IX comes on board. So I am a product of what happened in Title IX. And Christine Brennan, who's USA Today, author of 4 books, and the author of the new book that's just come out recently, On Her Game, Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports. Thank you, Christine, for making the time to be here.
Oh, Kirsten, it's great to be with you. Thanks. I know we were talking about this for months, and finally it's come to pass. It's delayed. And these are topics I think we all care about. I care about so much. And so absolutely thrilled to be with you. Thanks.
So I never do this, but I have to read your bio because I think it will tee up what we want to get after today, which is Christina is an award-winning national sports columnist for USA Today, commentator for ABC, CNN, PBS NewsHour, and the best-selling author of Inside Edge and On Her Game. Named one of the top 100 sports books of all time by Sports Illustrated. She's been selected as one of the country's top 10 sports columnists by multiple Associated Press sports editors and has covered the last 21 Olympics. Summer and winter. A trailblazer, she was the first woman sports writer at the Miami Herald, the first woman to cover the Washington's NFL team for the Washington Post, and the first president of the Association for Women in Sports Media. Yahoo! What an amazing bio.
Thanks. Well, I'm fortunate. I get to do what I love every day. I love it more today than the day I started, and I liked it a lot back then. At the age that so many of my college friends from Northwestern and high school friends from the Toledo suburbs and, everywhere, they're retiring or asking, you're going to retire, retire from this? I mean, this is what I love. I'm so fortunate, so lucky. You gotta work hard, but you do have to have some luck, as my late father used to say. And better to be lucky than good. I think came from that generation of our moms and dads and the Depression era, and with a smile, of course, laughing about that too, because clearly you got to work super hard. But I'm so lucky, so fortunate, and I've got a platform that I care so deeply about and respect, and want to make sure that I try to uphold those standards journalistically in everything I do. And so far, so good. We'll see what's next. But thank you. I'm honored, and I'm very fortunate.
We're eventually going to talk about 8-year-old Caitlin, but can we talk about 8-year-old Christine? Did she know she was going to be a journalist? When did this dream come about? Maybe take us back into your childhood and how sports played a role in your life.
Yeah, well, I do remember being 8-year-old me, and my mom joked that I was born size 6X and kept right on growing. I'm tall, I'm 5'11" and a half, and when I met Caitlin Clark, for the first time, I mean, we looked at each other in the eye. She's 6 feet, but it's whatever, half inch one way or the other, and I always was tall and was really coordinated and really good at sports at a young age. But this is a time when girls are not encouraged to love or play sports. I came along about 10, 12 years before you did.
Yep.
And there's no Title IX at that point, but I had my own personal Title IX. I had my dad and my mom too, but especially my dad, who'd been a football player in high school in the south side of Chicago, had a football scholarship at Drake University in Iowa, and then went into the army at the end of World War II. And but he was a good athlete, loved sports, and I'm the oldest of four kids, so it's not older brothers, it's me. And I have a younger brother and two younger sisters, and we all love sports. But it was just this sense. I asked my dad, actually, he's passed away now, but I wrote a book on my mom and dad growing up in sports called Best Seat in the House, a father-daughter memoir, came out in '06. And I interviewed him for the book. And, I said, what, at that time, we're talking the 1960s and then into the 70s. And, girls aren't supposed to be playing sports. And I'm sure people are looking at the Brennan household. What's going on with a father throwing a baseball with a girl and teaching me how to throw properly? Throw like a girl, of course, now is a compliment because we teach millions and millions of our daughters and nieces how to throw the ball properly, as you know. But back then, girls, did that push thing or whatever. Well, my dad, rear back, fire. So I always threw the ball properly because I was tall, because I was athletic. All the boys wanted to play sports with me. So I had this incredible positive role model in my mom and dad encouraging me. And then all the boys saying, come play with us. They'd shoo the other girls away. But I played with them, and I often was the first pick in the baseball games that we just throw together. There's no soccer for boys or girls at this point. There's no organized sports till about, I guess, second or third grade for the boys would do Little League baseball. And then when they did that, the girls couldn't play. So then my mom and dad got me into tennis, which was wonderful. And, now you'd go and march on the school and say, come on, the girls have to play. But this was the '60s. You just didn't think of that. And that's okay. That's totally fine. And so anyway, bottom line is I had such a positive experience where I was welcomed into sports by my mom and dad, by the boys. And, most girls were told to go play with their Barbies or go play house or go, dress up in the closet with their friends. I mean, yes, I had friends who were girls and I did some of that stuff too, but very little compared to what most girls did. And I asked my dad about this, and he said, we were comfortable in our own skin. My parents were 31 and 29, or almost 32 and almost 30 when they had me, oldest of four kids. And this is like late 50s, I'm a late baby boomer. And what, they're going to be bothered by the fact that they are playing sports with a girl, and if somebody's thinking that looks weird or strange, which I'm sure they did back then, that people thought that was strange, my mom and dad, encouraging a girl to play sports. And that's where our country was. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, younger people who are listening or watching, who are saying, what? Like how, what? But this is before Richard Nixon signs Title IX in 1972, as you know well, that all of a sudden opened the floodgates for girls and women to play sports. So I had that earlier. And yet I love writing, kept it. My mom and dad gave me a diary as a Christmas present when I was 10. And I wrote in it every day, one of those with a flowery and lock and, key and all that.
Key.
Yeah. But my diary entries, some of them were about, boys and girls and friends and whatever. As a 10-year-old, a fifth grader going, I guess, would have been fifth grade back then. And, those things. But most of it was about very practical things like my spelling words or what we did that day or who we went ice skating with or, whatever. And I would then give scores of, in the Rose Bowl, Ohio State beat, USC. And then I put the score in the Orange Bowl, and I wrote this as a 10-year-old girl.
And do you still have the journals?
I do. Oh yeah, I do. I have them all just about 20 feet from here. And I use them actually for writing when I wrote Best Seat in the House. And And, I sound like a stringer for the Associated Press as a 10-year-old. So that discipline, my mom encouraged that, like write every day. Now, some of the things I wrote, Kirsten, were like, nothing happened today.
Yeah.
Then I turned the page, nothing happened today either. It's ridiculous. But I did. Every day I wrote a sentence or two or the full page. And here I am 10 and then 11 later that year. And it's like, okay, I'm loving that. I'm loving journaling, writing in a diary, whatever. I love sports. And yet I never thought, now move ahead a few years, like to high school, and I became the co-editor of the high school paper, Ottawa Hills High School, suburbs of Toledo. And I still did not think I'd be a sports writer. And as I examined that, years later, well, I realized that here I was, probably one of the most athletic girls who loved writing in the country. I mean, I kept score of an entire Toledo Mud Hens AAA baseball season off the radio when I was 10. I mean,
Wow.
I don't think not only was no girl in America doing that in the late 60s, no boy in America was doing that. Minor league baseball, sitting there keeping score. I got a scorebook from my mom and dad, and then the broadcast on the radio. So here I am, so into this, and we'd go to games, Toledo Mud Hens season tickets, University of Toledo football season tickets, Michigan football season tickets, only 45 minutes away in Ann Arbor. And yet I thought I'd be a political journalist. As I said, I never would I do this? I mean, it seems fun to maybe be a radio announcer on a baseball season or whatever in the press box somewhere. That really seemed interesting to me, but I had no role models. I had no one to look at and say, oh, there's women doing this. Never read a woman's sports byline. In all the newspapers we got, family vacations, always bought the papers. Never saw a woman writing sports. Never saw a woman on TV broadcasting. There's no ESPN yet. There's none of that. Mm-hmm. And so if I, just such a sports loving, sports playing, encouraged to the max by the greatest parents on earth, to do all this, and loving writing, if I am not thinking I want to be a sports, what's missing? What's wrong? And it was that with all that encouragement, I couldn't, as Billie Jean King says, you need to see it to be it. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, I didn't. So I vowed to become, not necessarily right that day, but certainly in my 20s and 30s, I vowed to be the role model that I never had, and became the first president of the Association for Women in Sports Media, started our scholarship internship program that's now honored more than 200 women, and so including some very big names in the business. Years later, when they've succeeded, fund those scholarships. I fund now one, but two or one in my mom's and dad's name for the Association for Women in Sports Media. And anyone listening who has a daughter or even a son, we let men and boys join too, but especially college age. The Association for Women in Sports Media, AWSM, we call it awesome, and we've been around since 1988. And anyway, there's that. And then I mentor, tons of students, Northwestern, but Maryland, everywhere, high school kids that I meet, boys and girls, especially, young women, to encourage them because, the thought that I might not have taken this path, which turns out there was no chance of that. Of course I took the path, but it's pretty amazing of how easy it is in our world to not be encouraged or to find that, the world is telling you something. And again, the world was telling me, go, go, go. And I took it, of course, and all is well. But I do take that very seriously to this day.
It's a wonderful story because when I speak with parents and athletes and the kids are sometimes getting to that place where it could be middle school, it could be high school, it could be college, where they've hit the peak of their career and the parents are like, yes, but we've invested all of this time and energy and now what are they going to do? And I always encourage them, go back to your 8-year-old self. Like, what did you love to do when nobody was watching? There is gold in there to understand what truly motivates you and how beautiful that you had parents that supported that before you knew it to be a reality. When did you get your first byline? And did you have an editor that saw something in you in college, or how did that come about? Do you remember that being a big hill to climb?
Yeah, I went to, then I realized I wanted to be a journalist, like in high school. And a friend of mine, a very good friend, I just saw actually a lawyer in Atlanta. We had lunch, a teammate and a friend,
Oh,
She and I had lunch after I covered the Masters and went over to Atlanta and we caught up. And she told me, it was probably my sophomore year in high school. And not that I hadn't, maybe I knew this already, but I hadn't focused really yet. Maybe freshman year of high school. But she said, "Hey, Northwestern has a great journalism school." And a couple years earlier, I didn't even know where Northwestern was. You hear Northwestern and you're thinking, I mean, what is it? Well, we went to a Michigan football game and they were playing Northwestern. And I said to my dad, "Where's Northwestern?" Again, I would have been very young, probably, you know, gosh, 11 or 12. And he said, "It's north of Chicago." And of course, my mom and dad were from Chicago. So I had no affiliation whatsoever with Northwestern other than probably going to a few football games over the years when they were younger. And so okay, so I started looking, those big, thick books. I'm sure this will anyone, a certain age will remember.
no,
But those
I
big
those two,
guides, right?
yeah.
The college guide.
Fisk
Yeah,
college guides,
I
yeah.
think that was it. Yeah, and they were so thick, and you'd go through them, and you just read about schools, and there was this, icons for different majors, so journalism, and probably an index I could just go to on journalism, and I was reading about obviously Northwestern, Missouri, George Washington, I think Washington and Lee, Indiana, Michigan, a few others. Anyway, but Northwestern kept popping up as the best or one of the best. There were some articles about it that you'd read in Time magazine or whatever. No internet, of course. And somehow we all survived and didn't even miss it. Back then, didn't know what we didn't have, right? And I say the same about women's sports too. In many ways, that it was fun because you didn't know what was coming, and obviously I'm thrilled. I've worked my whole life that we see what's coming with Caitlin Clark and women's soccer and everything else, all the opportunities for girls and women in high school and college and onward in professional ranks. But yeah, I just there was just looking at all this, then I thought, well, okay, Big Ten, Northwestern, great school. I was number 2 in my class, a salutatorian, and the girl senior athlete of the year, also at my high school, small high school, 104 kids in our graduating class. So athletics, academics, and I applied to Northwestern early decision, got in. But again, I'm not thinking sports writing, and that's okay. I'm thinking I'd cover politics, which I also loved, and a lot of similarities. Winner, loser, all kind of scheduled, plays out in front of you. Kickoff is this time, the election is this day, those kinds of things. So I go to Northwestern, and I had an internship I worked at a bank for one summer, and then I had an internship after my sophomore year at my hometown paper, the Toledo Blade, on the city desk. So I wrote obituaries, I covered county fairs, I wrote about a mushroom foray, people doing some crazy, mushroom hunting. I wrote about a mail carrier who was retiring, never forget his name, Don Busdicker. I heard from his son after my book came out, Bessie in the House, and because I wrote about him in the book, and what a cool story to that last day for him. And but meanwhile, as I'm covering all this city news, I did go back to the sports section every now and then and see my heroes because I'd grown up reading the paper. So, my gosh, there's Jim Taylor and Tom Loomis and Dave Hackenberg and John Berger. I'm like, there they are, and you see their pictures in the paper, and now there they are. And I get to talk to them, and it was fun, and they're very nice. And so at my exit interview, I think it was, with the top editor who sent the interns back to school on their way after the summer, I'm sure I told him, I said, I would love to maybe do sports. And he said, yeah, we noticed, you always are back there talking to them and whatever. So the next summer, the Toledo Blade offered me a summer internship in sports. U.S. Open men's golf was at Inverness, which is in Toledo, beautiful golf course. And so that was a big deal. And I was there writing some stories, covering the U.S. Open golf and looking at all the names of the golf writers, many of whom, of course, became dear friends and peers. I'll never forget that. Again, the gee whiz, incredible feeling of what would 20-year-old me have thought of what I have now. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. And I never lose sight of that, ever. And so then I covered sports. And then I also went to Lexington, Kentucky, had an internship, Northwestern internship there. I did some sports and some news. And then I was just like, this is what I want, sports. And so the Miami Herald summer internship, got my master's from Northwestern, and went back. And Miami Herald had never had a woman sports writer. It was 1981, and they were behind. They were definitely behind New York Times, Boston Globe. So many women were out there now. I really didn't know it because there's no social media, but knew some of the names. Anyway, probably 20, 30 women covering sports in the country. Miami Herald hires me. And then 3.5 years later, I come up to Washington, D.C., where I am. The Washington Post hires me to cover the NFL and the Washington football team. So, that's how it worked. And so my first bylines would have been the Daily Northwestern, where I was the managing editor my senior year, covering a lot of, again, political news. I barely covered sports at Northwestern. And then, but tons and tons of bylines. And then the Toledo Blades, certainly. So that's how it happened. And again, it was just a progression, but following, to your point of what the message is, or any thoughts or ideas we can give people, is follow your heart. I mean, nothing would have sounded stranger than for a young woman growing up in Toledo, Ohio, and then going to Northwestern to say she wanted to be a sports writer in the 60s and then 70s, even into the 80s. It would have sounded, if I had said, I want to be an astronaut,
Yeah.
people would have said, oh, yes, a woman could walk on the moon someday.
Yeah.
But to a woman covering sports, and so here I am, point being, with support, with encouragement, obviously with opportunity to go to a great university like Northwestern and just have the degree and the education of, that was launched into the career of my dreams. But all of that shows you just, you don't let the rest of the world tell you what you're going to do. You just do it. And, but it would have, I'm sure people were like scratching their head, like, what's she doing? My mom and dad, when I left the room, they might have like, gosh, are there jobs for women in this? But they never let me know that. Just go for it. And that positive interact. You don't want to know how high the mountain is when you're starting to climb the mountain. You just go. And obviously it was, it turned out pretty good.
Yeah. Not too bad. And I know there's an ever shifting landscape with media and how that's all working out. But what advice would you have to someone that has that inclination of like, oh, I'd love to write, and oh, I'd love to do what you're doing? Where do you start?
Yeah, well, certainly if they're young, certainly a high school paper, that was it starting for me. If there's a high school radio station, TV station, kids, even young people today can blog and have all kinds of opportunities on social media. We got to be careful, of course, as everyone, it's just, some of these sites like X, Twitter can be a cesspool for sure. And yet I use it because that's where I break news. The sport, it's still very big for sports, but I also use so many others. But Instagram, whatever you're on, I mean, that's an outlet. Certainly young people, I know a young woman who's now in college, but she got in touch with me while she was in high school, and she actually had a podcast, and she interviewed me. So that's not unusual. I mean, her mom was like in the room, in the background, and, obviously that makes a lot of sense for a young person who's putting stuff out there. But having guidance from adults, but I think there's, the high school experience, that's for me, high school paper, I loved it. And I knew that was fun for me. And then Northwestern, and then those internships. So I think that's it. If there's something you love, go for it. The business has changed. The business, I mean, I'm brutally honest about everything. The bottom has fallen out of the newspaper business for sure. And that is terrible for our democracy. And anyone who celebrates it or thinks that the media is the enemy, public enemy, or says things like some people have said in this town of Washington, 4 miles away from me, that's awful. The United States absolutely needs a thriving media. And so there will always be opportunity, if there's young journalists out there, young people, to go for it. A lot more websites are hiring. There may not be benefits to start off. You may not have the stock option plan. You might only get a few $100s, but you're doing what you love and you're getting going. Now, then at some point, maybe as a young person, you make a decision with your parents or whoever, God, this isn't going well. I'm in my late 20s and I'm still slogging away. I mean, those are things you can start to work, you work through. But I always encourage every student I talk to, I mentor, I text with, whatever, to go for it, because the good ones will make it. and they'll do well. And there's also so many opportunities in media relations and public relations, stuff that we would never have done because that was like, as church and state, we're journalists, we're not going to the PR side, but that's melding now. And, you want young people to have jobs and to be able to, or work for MLB.com or masters.com or .org or whatever it is, where we would never have done that, but that's where opportunities and jobs are. And so, that's not as taboo as it once was. And then I think just in general, again, whether it's writing, broadcasting, but if you love to write, it doesn't have to be journalism. I mean, there's fiction, there's obviously many, many ways to go that way. Most young writers are probably not going to have books published and be super successful, but some are. There are those 20-something-year-old success stories, New York Times bestsellers. That happens. Again, if you love writing, there's a ton of ways to go with, college and education, all of that. And I think professors and teachers in high school are great resources, of course, to help with that. And then the mentors you have in college, for sure. But to make a career out of it, to get into that side of it, if you love writing, you can turn it into, journalism kind of writing, TV work, radio work. And most of them, Kirsten, you need to know all of it now. You need to be very comfortable in front of the camera, behind the camera, know how to work it, not hard to do. My age group, obviously, we're not as adept at all this stuff. Young people, they get it, they know how to do it. Be ready to be able to, do all kinds of things with PowerPoints, with speaking, and writing as well, because you're a one man or one woman band often. Like at the Olympics, they'll have one of the top, like the anchor from a lot of cities around the country will then go to the Olympics. This happened in Milan a few months ago. And I'm being interviewed by a woman I know very well, who's the number one superstar TV local news in a city. I won't say it, no big deal, but no reason to mention it. But in a major league city, and she is there. Well, she's running the camera. I'm setting the camera up, and she's doing the interview with me. And actually, another colleague is there, and she's also the star of another city, the top anchor in that city, on the news, the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news, whatever. But they are literally doing all of the work that used to be camera people, producers, whatever. They're gone. And that's just, that's how this works. And that's a shame that that's happened. But to have that young person be able to be adept at all of that, behind the camera, front of the camera, and especially behind the camera, you learn a lot. And if you want to someday be a superstar, in front of the camera, well, learn how to produce and learn how to get all that done. And so there, again, lots of ways to do it. And these young people have lots of time. I was in a hurry and I was like, I gotta get out of Miami, even though I loved it. Got to get to I want to get to the Washington Post. Got there. Well, I was 26 and I'm at the Washington Post. I mean, would it have mattered if I was 36? I mean, at the time I thought so. So I would say another huge piece of advice I give to young people: don't slow down. And don't stop yourself from being the type A personality or whatever you are. Go for it. But also, and I did this too, stop and smell the roses. And I had a great time in Miami and a wonderful boyfriend and great, fabulous time. So it's not, but I was thinking, I want to, I got to do this. And I certainly had plenty of time and it worked out fine, of course. But that would be, the learning along the way, which is huge, and maybe a smaller place that you start working at. That's another thing for young journalists. You're probably not going to go to New York or Chicago or LA. You're probably, if you go to Tupelo, Mississippi, and that's where you start, or Spokane, Washington, or even smaller, that's okay. I went to a big place, the Miami Herald, because they needed to have a woman. I was kind of a token. I was their first woman. And obviously they knew my work from previous internship the summer before. So I never thought of myself as a token. But I guess theoretically, if someone wanted to look at it, that's what I was. It worked out great. Obviously fine. But if going to a smaller place is not bad. Now, if you're 35 and you're still in the smaller place, okay, then you may say, hey, is it time for law school or 30 years old or whatever. But I think you go for what you love. And if you found something you love, you're already ahead of most people who've not figured out what they want to do yet. It's okay also, those people, if they haven't figured it out, that is fine, because this generation, these young people born right around the turn of the century in the late 90s and the early part of this century, I think, will change jobs and will have so much changing in technology. They'll probably be very unlike their parents and their grandparents in that way.
Yeah. careers are going to be very fluid, I think. And there's, something to be said for that too. Like we got to be where we're like, oh, we're going to get into one company. And I thought I was going to work for Nike for my whole career. And I mean, I was there 15 years, but you realize, oh, I can take all these tools that I learned along the way. And that's what I love about the metaphor that you're giving, which is I think the hard work and the hustle and the grind and the grit that you learned as a young athlete who was willing to go play with the boys, who didn't, that all translated to your career, which is, now being willing to go where the story is and move and be opportunistic. And I think some of the best success in life we have is when we're willing to say yes to the adventure and like, oh, I'll show up on their doorstep. Like I heard Nike was hiring in Vienna, Austria. I'm on a train from Budapest to show up at their doorstep. Sure, you should hire me, right? And usually something good works out when you're willing to say, I don't know how this is going to play out, but man, wouldn't this be cool if I, got a swing at this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have to go for it. And it's okay if you're a little nervous, or it's okay if you're a little shy. I mean, I was shy, kind of reluctant, when I second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, I think I, was maybe a little quiet, I'd of course raise my hand and say stuff, but I wasn't like that, the first kid to do that. It sounds funny now because obviously I'm out there in a pretty big way on things, but it's okay. But you just push through that. You push through.
And it's a muscle that you've obviously used a lot, right? So now it feels very normal. But same, I was more of an introverted kid, but grew up in Missoula, Montana, in a little itty bitty pond where, I remember vividly after my high school basketball games running out to the mailbox to see if we got a picture in the newspaper, right? Like that was the way oh, look, I'm a big deal, right? And you keep using that muscle, and then I'm going to put myself out and I'm going to, so kids now, like reach out to those coaches. If you don't hear back, it's okay. No harm, no foul, but being willing to put yourself out there. And I think with social media, that's become, easier to do, but also I think kids feel a lot more vulnerable when they do it.
Oh, without a doubt. And I'm in awe of that, knowing about the recruiting process and having seen it up close with family, but also, covering it all. Yeah. I mean, to be rejected or you have to then say no to someone that the coach wants you to come somewhere, or you're thinking about it, or you get to that place with the transfer thing and now all of a sudden they bring in somebody else, and it's tough. It will hold you in good stead moving forward. I mean, life is not always easy. We're talking about the great things. There are moments, there are failures, there are disappointments. And if you've had them at a young age, it's no fun, but you are going to be better off as an adult for it, even though it doesn't seem like that at the time. And, but yeah. And I think because of cell phones, because of texting and coach, there's much more rapport with adults than we ever had. I mean, for me, the rapport was family, friends, neighbors, of course, teachers, but not, you weren't, that you would never have had that kind of relationship that so many young people now have with adults via, texting a role model or a potential coach or an alum. There's just there's more access. But that's also good. That's a good skill to learn. And you hope that there's not disappointment. You hope it's success all the time. Of course, we all want that. But I applied for an internship at the Chicago Tribune when I was at Northwestern. I did not get it. And I think, that was probably my second year then in Toledo, which of course I was happy because I was at home and with my family, and that was fine too. And I loved it. But that was just, a disappointment when I found out that I didn't get I didn't get the Washington Post internship one summer and then the next summer. And I have the rejection letter, very nice, it's an internship. It's not like the end of the world, but just, thank you. And I'm sorry, we did not pick you for our intern class in whatever year. And, we wish you good luck in your career. And I think this was dated 1979. I've got it, as I said. Well, the last line, we wish you good luck in your career. Well, 5 years later, I was walking in the door of the Washington Post.
As an employee.
I was there for 12 years. So yeah. There's the rejection letter, and now I'm there. So it's funny how that happens, and it will happen for so many young people for sure in their lives because of the fluidity of where our business world is and our society is, I think.
And sometimes it's not ever. It's just a not yet. So go get the experience. You needed more experience, or the timing wasn't right. Those variables that lead into that. But like speaking of timing, let's pivot a little bit and get into your book because, as we mentioned at the top, 1972, the Title IX comes into being. Most people now know what it is, but it was saying that the girls had to have equality. You had to have parity. If you had a boys sport, you had to have a girls sport. I grew up in Montana, as I said, and I looked it up as I was prepping for this. And in 1982, Karen Ridgway sued the Montana state legislature over, I don't know exactly what the details were, but I was in middle school when it had been 10 years in the making. It wasn't until 1986, which was when I was in high school, that it actually got in front of the court, and it was then said, okay, I grew up where volleyball was in the spring and basketball was in the fall, which made it impossible to get recruited outside of the state because there was no internet still yet, and there was no way to be seen. And so it took until I was almost out of high school before those rules were. So we're talking about history, but not really that far back, right? Like that's late 80s into the 90s. We start seeing things like girls getting full ride scholarships. I played at a college that the first school had 15 full rides at San Diego State. When I got to William and Mary, they only had 7. So like she had to break up her scholarships in order to keep girls on the team. You get into the 90s where, okay, we have more parity, but even something like 5, maybe it was 7 years ago, but I remember Clemson's football team, the men all got 3 custom made suits, each of the 80 football players, but the girls didn't get sports bras. They were like, could we get sports bras? Like, no, that's not considered part of your uniform. So we've come, a really far ways, back to days where girls could only play to half court, right? In basketball, they weren't allowed to run because heaven forbid you run all the way down the court. You might lose your female parts. So they said we've come to where we understand women can run. I think the woman in London just ran a 2:15 marathon this past week. Like, it's amazing how far we've come. Yet we still have a long ways to go. And here's a woman that's really helping to move that needle. And this book is tremendous, talking about that whole history and then also kind of what she's done in a very short amount of time.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was, I think you accurately and wonderfully assessed the kind of the historical relevance of Title IX for sure. And how, the nation, after, for decades telling girls and women, generations, you can't play sports, go, as I talked earlier, shooing the girls away, you can't do anything, and not even have any organized sports until freshman year of high school for me. And then I was a 6-sport athlete in high school, which sounds like I was a great athlete. I was good, but it was because there was no specialization to go to play college mostly, but also, you just didn't have a lot of people playing. So I literally played field hockey.
They needed you. Yeah.
Tennis and basketball, volleyball, and then the spring was track and field and softball, and had some that I mean, basketball loved, volleyball, tennis. I mean, I love them all in some ways. Softball, field hockey for sure. But I could do all that. So you're right. That is the history. And we've come so far, so the glass is half full, not half empty. And I think for people who are listening or watching, they know that their daughters, if they have kids who are playing sports now in school, age girls, and of course women in college, that you've seen it. You see where that is, and you've seen the 1999 Women's World Cup team and how the nation just fell in love with what we'd created with Title IX, with that incredible save by Brianna Scurry, and then of course the goal by Brandy Chastain that the Rose Bowl filled to capacity for a women's sports event. I was there covering that, and I'll never forget it. It was just one of the huge stepping stones of Title IX, and of course that was 1999. So that's 27 years after Title IX is signed by Richard Nixon in June of 72. So you got, that you could see the, women in baggy shorts and shirts and long soccer, socks, and the nation just is totally head over heels. So that's the girl next door all grown up. And then 2.5 years after that, a young, girl is born in West Des Moines, Iowa, who we've never heard of course, because she's a little baby, and she's born in January, of course, January 22nd, number 22 of 2002, and that's Caitlin Clark. And so she is born, and I do say in the book and on her game, I do set her time and growing up in the framework of what has now happened, and now the way the nation is just wants girls. Every mom and dad wants their daughter as well as their son to play sports. And for generations, as I said, we were telling girls no and women no. What on earth were we thinking as a nation to not teach young women how to win and lose at a young age, teamwork, sportsmanship, all the things that make them better citizens of this country, better leaders, better role models, better whatever that girl you see in the kitchen every morning, whether she's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a journalist, a businesswoman, a mom, a coach, a teacher, some combination thereof, she'll be better at it because she played sports. And for generations, we said no. I mean, just insane. But now we're saying yes. And now we see the result. And so out of this, Caitlin Clark, emerges. She wouldn't have needed a lot of that national cultural support because she had an older brother and she has an older brother and a younger brother, but her mom and dad, encouraged it. So what was going on in the Clark household was probably going to happen even if Title IX was not exploding around her. But the opportunities, she played against the boys because there was no girls team for a year or two. Well, clearly that's not happening anymore in Iowa. But Iowa also had the 6-on-6 women's basketball, girls basketball that you described, where you couldn't cross the center line because you might not have babies or something. How ridiculous! And I do detail 3 or 4 pages. I don't do deep dives in a lot of things, partially because I had to write the book in 4 months. I just was, we just went forward. Scribner said, do the book, no book proposal, no plan. This is huge. You can do it. Go. And went to the Paris Olympics, covered that, came home, and then went right to Indy, who everyone does that, of course, Paris to Indy. And I love Indy and love Indianapolis and know it well. And so, I'm of course writing this book and this story, but she's, literally, it's this young woman who is doing all these things that are, of course, of the time, and then doing them even bigger and better. So Iowa place loves women's basketball, again, the 6-on-6, but they would flock to Des Moines to watch the girls, like high school teams, play. So there was this love of girls and women's basketball, even if it was the wrong game. Of course, long since gone. Now it's 5-on-5. And out of this, on the shoulders of these women, comes Caitlin Clark. So you've got the great support of Iowa. And then, people ask me this all the time. There's so many great women's basketball players. Why Caitlin Clark? And it's very simple to me. She's chucking it from the parking lot and it's going in. Yeah. Those logo threes are jaw-dropping. And when men, and I've had so many men, grandfathers, fathers, guys that we would have called male chauvinists, tell me on my book tour, interviews, whatever, I never watched women's sports. I didn't like it. I thought women's basketball wasn't any good. I watch her, and now it's appointment TV. I race home to make sure I'm watching her play. We bought tickets. We went to Indy to watch her. We went to Iowa, but when she was in college. It's extraordinary. The nation was so ready for this moment, and it's Caitlin Clark, and it's the passing, it's the pace, and it's something that Americans and most people have not seen in a women's basketball player. And then the result comes from that. So it's not that other players weren't great, but they were playing probably in a bit more of a conventional way. Some of the greats of all time. Maya Moore, Caitlin's favorite player, Minnesota Lynx. She couldn't sell out an arena, not her fault. It would have been great if she'd become Caitlin Clark, but she didn't. Or even going all the way back to Cheryl Swoops or something. The nation, no, it wasn't happening then. It's happening now. But Caitlin's the perfect person at the right time. As the nation, again, we have reached critical mass with Title IX, full blast for our girls and daughters and neighbors, the ones born now that in their maybe early 20s. That's what we're seeing, and along comes the perfect person at the right time.
And what I love about it, and you told her story so well around. So I talk a lot about mindset and, helping athletes. So I work one-on-one with athletes or working with teams and, how do we reach these levels? And, competitive trick-or-treating, like that she would have to go home and shower before she could eat her candy, because like that's my girl. Like those types of, you like, that's not something that, okay, now you're on a basketball court, okay, Caitlin, you've got to be really aggressive, right? Like she was taking the training wheels off, or making her dad take the training wheels off, because she wanted to be like her older brother, right? So some of it with parents, I get that question a lot, where it's like, well, how do I teach my kid to be more competitive? Some of it is learned, but a lot of it, and what you see and you talk about throughout the book, these opportunities, she's not doing it for the stage or for the clapback. She's doing it because she's passionate about what she does. And that's clearly something that's hardwired. That's an innate, intrinsic skill, right?
Oh, that's her. That's Caitlin Clark. And to your point, it's thousands, like tens of thousands of other girls and
Yeah.
boys too, but in this case we'll talk more about girls playing sports now. Absolutely, just strong and tough and want to win and be competitive, and a culture that is now encouraging that, as opposed to be demure and I mean, when we finished our girls basketball games at Ottawa Hills, the other team would join us in the home ec room and we'd have cookies and milk, and it was actually nice. You know what I mean? That was not a bad thing. And we'd be in our jerseys, and obviously, if you played a lot, you were kind of sweaty. But of course, the game wasn't the same game now. I mean, but we'd run up and down the court all day, and the other team would still be in their jerseys. We didn't, no one, they got on the bus, or, well, actually, there were really no buses. They would just get rides from parents, because we didn't have buses even for games until my senior year, one basketball game. And so, bottom line is, we did that kind of thing, and it's okay. In fact, it's kind of lovely and kind of, a kind gesture. Well, that's not. No. In fact, I did a Good Morning America piece back in '97, and I interviewed the girls at my high school, the athletes at Ottawa Hills High School in '97, and I mentioned the cookies and milk. They said, we are not going to the home ec room for cookies and milk, and that was 1997. So Caitlin Clark's not even born yet. So the point is, it was changing quickly, and anyone who doubts these changes or says, oh, women's, no, it is such a cataclysmic, wonderful change that has affected our nation. We're going to have more than 50 women in the Senate. We're going to have more than 50 women, 50% House of Representatives. We're going to have women presidents. I know we've had some stops and starts, obviously, on that, but we are going to have women presidents into the 30s, 40s, 50s, and on, maybe year after year after year, every 4 years. And the common denominator for all these running CEO, running universities, Fortune 500 companies, the common denominator will be they all played sports because of Title IX and learned those life lessons the way boys were learning them for years. Now girls and women are. And so, but yeah, I think, for Caitlin Clark, it's just one of those things that the timing is right, her personality is right, and it is accepted and beloved. And that's the part. I would do radio shows when I would cover women's basketball in the '90s for the Washington Post. I covered Dawn Staley. She played at the University of Virginia. And, I did some coverage of her. I was mostly covering football, but I'd do some coverage of the women's Final Four and what have you. And I would go on radio shows, sports talk radio. And those would be much more, macho kind of, they're still macho and a lot of testosterone, but really, really crazy. They'd say anything. There was no sense of decorum or sense of you might have a daughter someday and maybe you don't want to say all this terrible stuff about women. And it went on over the airwaves, and it was loud and crazy anyway. And so I'd be on talking, and there'd be callers calling in, and be laughing at me for talking about women's basketball. Like, why are you even on talking about women's basketball? All they're doing is they're rolling around the floor and doing jump balls. And by the way, that wasn't entirely wrong. There was a lot of that in the '90s and '80s, right? Because again, you didn't have the coaching that is now matched with the talent, which is now matched with nutrition, and parents and dads and moms caring for their daughters and doing the camps in the summer and the AAU. Everything is moved in sync and unison to create this critical mass of great play. And I would, they'd laugh at me or whatever as we do the interview, and callers calling in, and that's fine. I could handle that, no worries. And those men, let's now make them in their 60s or 50s or 60s, and their sons, they're the ones that are wearing the number 22 jerseys, to the game, but they're also wearing them to the grocery store and the gas station.
Yeah.
And they are proud to wear a woman's jersey. I mean, I can't even believe I just said that sentence.
Right.
That's how what this sea change is in our country. And it is lovely to see. But Caitlin has made it again. I wish it was other athletes. I wish it was some of the black athletes, 74% black league. Like we get in our polarized society, we get that conversation. We get why
Hmm.
a white woman from Iowa, that could be jarring for some. It shouldn't be, but I've never spent 1 second as a black person, and I deal with all that in the book as well, and talk to have great voices on this topic.
Hmm.
But of course, players in Indy, most of them black women, love having Caitlin. They want to be on the receiving end of those passes, and they know that Caitlin can't do every restaurant opening, and they can go and make $5,000 or $10,000 for an hour or whatever they make, and representing the Indiana Fever. And so they're all making more money because of the proximity to Caitlin Clark, and they get to be her teammate on the court. It's a pretty great thing, and it's, as I said, wonderful to see. The time has more than since come, but boy, oh boy, has it come. Right now, we're right in the center of it.
Yeah, the sea change, right? And that you highlight that in the book about how, yes, it's given her a microphone, but it's given a lot of people, and you had the numbers of 18.1 million people tuned in to the 2024 national championship for women, right? Like larger than the men's, right? And this year to see Corey Close coach against Don Staley, like that made me so happy. I said that to my husband. I was like, wow, to see two women in the finals. Like same on the volleyball side, you barely see women make it to the Final Four as coaches too. And they're the ones that played in the 70s and 80s that know how important this is, that we have I was thinking as you were talking in the Muffet McGraw interview where she talks about the number of women and how we need to increase the number of women in Congress and the number of women in coaching and our visibility to show, as you said, you got to see it to believe it. Oh, I can be that too.
Well, exactly. In fact, it was funny as you were talking before you said Muffet McGraw's name. I was going to say everyone should go to YouTube and look at that 3-minute interview that was an answer to a question at the Women's Final Four about the importance of women coaching women and having our daughters and our nieces and our granddaughters and the girl next door have role models who are women. And nothing against men. And there are great men who have coached and, fabulous. But when they retire, when whatever they're done, universities and high schools, but especially universities, actually all of them, not just, but obviously universities are higher profile, should be hiring women. And for those out there, maybe not on your podcast, but people in general, like, well, that's a quota system. That is ridiculous. That is not a quota system. That is about giving our daughters many, many options, and nieces and granddaughters, whatever, many options to see what could be their future. If the idea is sports is an education, it's part of our education, it's part of the high school system, part of the college system, whatever, and you learn from sports, then one of the things we want young women to learn from sports is that they can have a career in sports. And maybe they want to do sports medicine. Maybe they want to do sports administration. Maybe they want to coach. Maybe whatever, be in this media, sports media. We're seeing that in our, Women Association of Women in Sports Media. Girls and women who play sports, they all play sports. Some of them want to be in the media. That's fantastic. And we see more women than ever before. Thousands of women now covering sports in our country. Well, if they want to be a coach, if they're being coached by a man, Gino Auriemma comes to mind. Obviously, disgraced himself terribly at the women's Final Four, but obviously also has had an incredible program at UConn and churned out and graduated some incredible women leaders and terrific basketball players, of course, over and over again. But if you want that, then you need to see it to be it, as Billie Jean King says. So why would a university hire another man? Now, I guess if there are no women candidates, but then you've done a very poor job as a university in looking for candidates. Because to your point, we've got so many girls and women playing sports. They love sports. If they were, if it was 20 years ago and they were in college, well, now they're 40 and they are ready. Or it's a failure of the system that they're not ready to be coaches. And this has to happen. And volleyball, you're right. You look at the D1, finals and there's so many men coaching women. I, of course, have a family member who's an excellent volleyball player. And as we talked off camera before, I'm happy to just say that, I've seen her be coached by women and men. And then again, this is not male bashing at all here. I do
Mhm.
want to make that point again, but it just makes me really happy when I see that her team or whatever teams I'm watching them play over the years, from little, club volleyball and high school all the way up to college, that I'm watching women leaders and having these young women, watching them learn from female leaders. And that's what Muffet McGraw is talking about. And that, I think, is essential. And if we're looking at the next 50 years of Title IX, or next 46 years, if we're almost at the 54th anniversary, I mean, two huge steps, I think, Kirsten, that are necessary is more female coaches,
Mhm.
because that is some sports great, other sports not so great. And going to Northwestern, I see our women's lacrosse coach, Kelly Amante Hiller, who now has a coaching tree of like 18 or 20 head coaches all through women's lacrosse throughout the college
Wow.
level. It's amazing. And that's what you want. And again, it's not against the men. It's just this is a women's sport. The men can coach in the men's sport, or
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's number one. And then 1A, or tied with that, would be to reach the underserved communities. We've won the suburbs, right? The Title IX is, suburbs are great, and
Yeah.
and and places where parents can spend money on travel teams and on AAU teams, club teams, whatever. But the underserved urban areas, underserved rural areas, no, we have not reached all those girls and women yet.
Yeah.
And if we believe it's about our country being stronger, and including physical fitness and mental health, and of course leadership and teamwork and competition and all the things that we know sports give us, then we absolutely want to continue to have Title IX work its magic throughout all facets of society, socioeconomic, but especially reach those kids that we haven't reached, those urban kids, where the schools maybe don't have the money, and public schools, whatever, and also, obviously rural as well, but places where we have not yet made those huge inroads in having girls and women play sports. And that's certainly something to work on with Title IX over the next, as I said, 46 years.
I'm going to be in Boston next week speaking at the Aspen Institute and at their Project Play Summit, and that's their big initiative is 62 million by 2032, I think, or 2030 is that, but like that, to that point exactly, is how do we get access to more, this pay to play model, 46 billion dollar business that is youth sports, where we're cutting off opportunity for kids that, like we said, isn't about the podium or the trophy or the platform. It's about health and mental health and, camaraderie and leadership and all of the good things that these kids don't have access to. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
It's a great program. Tom Ferry is a good friend. He was,
Oh yeah.
yeah, when I was at the Miami Herald, he talks about how he was, covering high schools a few years younger, and I'd be on the phone, we'd be talking, or and I've done quite a few of the events that they do at the Aspen Institute, and including in Aspen, and it is great, but it's a real uphill climb.
Yeah.
Tom and I've had dinner, we've obviously talked about this for years. You're obviously a wonderful voice, huge voice on this topic as well. And they were in Baltimore, was that 2 years ago? And I
Yeah.
was part of that one, as well as Aspen. And so these are important conversations. But unfortunately, because we have to be realistic, right now the trend is money, 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 throw money at it, and we're leaving so many of these kids behind. And I'm sure there are people listening and watching us. Some of them have the wherewithal, right? They have the finances, and their kid can do all the clubs and travel and go to the national championships in Florida or California or wherever, and do all that, in whatever sport it might be. And then the other ones, we lose so many, especially girls and young women in like junior high, middle school, where they're fed up, body image issues, and then, of course, just the economics. The mom and dad can't pay for it anymore. Or the parents or the aunts or the uncles or grandparents, whoever's helping out, somebody has to this happens in figure skating and Olympic sports, tennis, where you have to get another mortgage on the house or whatever just to keep the kid in the sport.
Yes.
But until our nation really, really cares about this, people like Tom and of course Aspen and the Project Play and everything that they're doing is so great, but it's often falling on deaf ears, or the sports military industrial complex that we have, whatever you want to call it. Obviously not military, but that's
Yeah.
the name military industrial complex. So that Dwight Eisenhower talked about, that we can talk about, sports industrial complex. It just rolls on and everyone's feeding the beast. And what about the discard pile where we lose so many young girls and boys, before they get their driver's license, right? And that's a huge issue. Olympic sports and obviously other high school and school sports for sure.
It's already been an hour. I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but maybe we could just touch on Olympics a little bit. I mean, 21 Olympics is phenomenal. I'm living in Los Angeles, so I'm hoping to get to my first. I did have that as a goal as a kid. And actually, when I played at San Diego State, my college coach had played on the national team. And that was like, she was a hero to me, she gave me one of her jerseys and I slept with it under my pillow in college, which I think back on my 19-year-old self and I was like, who is that? But, it just shows, to your other point, about how important it is to have female role models. And, you think, I'm sure she doesn't even know that became a thing for me. And I never made it to the Olympics. I hope to get to the LA 2028 as a spectator, but it also was just this wonderful inspiration of, oh, okay, I can't play, but then I can go work for Nike, or then it became the stepping stone to the rest of my journey, which was still unfolding. So maybe can you talk a little bit about the Olympic movement and kind of how you see it through your lens with so many years of experience of covering it?
Yeah, I covered 84 in LA, and it's going to be LA to LA for me. I would have hoped to go to one Olympics as a fan growing up, with the family, buy tickets to one someday. And because I watched every second on TV and would get a little teary-eyed when they ended, going back to Munich, which was, of course, terrible. The 11 Israeli athletes and coaches who were killed by terrorists on September 5th of 1972. I'll never forget it. It kind of drives me as a journalist to this day when I cover the Olympics, thinking about that. But Montreal and Lake Placid, I was still in college then, and just watching it on TV and just loving it. So the hockey, miracle.
And the boycott of the '80 Olympics, and how bad you feel for those athletes that didn't get to go, worked so hard.
Horrible. Yeah, 76, they may be too young. 84, they were too old. And I know them. I know some of them, and even the ones that had a chance in 84. They talk, Mary T. Maher, the great Madame Butterfly, the swimmer. I've covered her for years, known her, obviously, the 84 Olympics and onward, 88 in Seoul as well. And, they couldn't compete against the Soviet bloc because the Soviets returned the favor in 84. The U.S. boycotted, Jimmy Carter decided to boycott the 80 Olympics in Moscow, for those who don't know. But then in 84, the Soviets returned the favor and they boycotted. So East Germany and many other communist bloc countries at the time boycotted the 84 games. And it was still fantastic to cover, but you didn't have all the top competition. And the Americans and other Western nations wanted to so beat the Soviets and the East Germans back in the day. But, I think it's, that's just loving the Olympics and watching them and what they could be. And then to be covering them, it's extraordinary. It's just an honor. And I love it. Take it so seriously. And Milan, I'm just there and cover that there for 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, whatever. And I mostly covered a lot of figure skating because I've written a couple best-selling books on figure skating and that sport after Tanya Nancy and that whole fiasco in 1994, covering every second of that. And the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat on the Friday, the 13th of February. You had Ilya Malinin, who I've covered throughout his entire career at the top of the sport. I covered his mom. His coach was the 1998 Nagano Olympics, finished 8th behind Tara Lipinski and Michelle Kwan, and then moved to the United States and got married. And she and her husband had a son born in Northern Virginia in 04, and that's Ilya Malinin. And he's a wonderful young man, just terrific. Looks you in the eye, polite, kind, just terrific. And then he may be the worst meltdown we have ever seen by a gold medal favorite in any sport ever. I mean,
quad god goes
to collapse and finish 8th. I still can't believe I saw it right there by the ice. Just the pall that was cast over the entire arena, and then how he handled it. doing interview after interview after interview. I wrote a column on this. Folks can find that there's no paywall. Just click through anything at USA Today and you're in. And just how remarkable he was. That, I've covered NFL players who throw helmets against the locker and stalk off. Tiger Woods would stalk off or not answer questions. That's, part of his whole career that I covered every second of him from the late 90s onward. And, get mad, and pro athletes, I'm not going to talk. They're pout and they get upset, and they get to do it again next week. And Ilya Malinin has to wait 4 years. 4 years. What a class act. If you have kids and you want to, how do you handle this? Read up on Ilya, watch what he did. And he ran the gauntlet. It's the mixed zone is where we do the interviews. And it's like a labyrinth. It's like a maze. And the athlete just walks through, and there's a little kind of a little fence or wooden plywood that goes all along that keeps the media on one side and the athletes on the other. Now, you can touch each other, you can shake someone's hand, but it's just a way to organize it. And he stopped and did every television station from around the world, all the big rights holders that were there. Started with NBC with Andrea Joyce, then went through all those, then came and did all the print and all the AP wire service, everyone.
And this is right after he lost, or after he...
Yeah, wow. But he walked off the ice and did these interviews for at least a half hour, 45 minutes, thanking people, saying, I blew it, I screwed up. I've never seen anything like it. Again, knowing that, and he's young, he's 21, he's absolutely crushed. I mean, this is as devastating a moment as any athlete I've ever seen, other than someone actually getting injured or something terrible happening. Just an athletic performance.
There was so much hype about him going in, right?
Yeah,
so the pressure.
He calls himself the quad god. People thought that was the media. No, he did that. But there's a bit of and he did that several years ago. But there's a wonderful Brian Boitano and I, for our podcast Milan Magic, we interviewed him right off the bat. And that's how people can find that easily. And he's like, but it's a lovely, kind, sweet bravado. It's not, I call myself quad god. He's just adorable in that way. And you could then see the result. He didn't, stalk off, throw things. I mean, every interview for at least a half hour, 45 minutes. No chance to go to the bathroom. Nope. No chance to towel off. No chance to, he had some water, I guess. It's just incredible what he did. Mm-hmm. So that's remarkable. And I think every kid in school, every young person should watch that, read about it. I wrote about it, so many other people. Watch the videos of how he handled himself. It was remarkable, and really should be a study in how to handle sportsmanship, kindness, class, dignity, everything, keeping a sense of perspective while you are absolutely devastated, knowing you have to wait 4 years for another Olympic opportunity that may never come. I mean, right. I hope it does. I hope he's got several more in him. The next one would be Salt Lake City after that. So he wants to certainly go to a U.S. Olympics, like the swimmers in track and field have a U.S. Olympics in 2 years now in L.A. But there's no guarantee of any of this. And then a week later, 6 days later, you've got the women's final, and you've got Alyssa Liu out there, and she's smiling away. And now we can quantify the pressure, the Olympic pressure, because we have just seen what it did to the greatest male figure skater, technically, in history. 7 quadruple jumps in December, the quad god. There is no one who's ever done what Ilya Malinin has done on the ice. He is that good, and just absolutely falling apart, 2 falls, stumbling all over the ice. 6 days later, now you can see what's happening. You know how tough the tension, the pressure, the anxiety. And Alyssa Liu just goes out there and smiles, and smiling for 4 minutes while you're on a 1/4-inch blade of steel. It's like landing on a butter knife, and just jump after jump, and just extraordinary how she handled that pressure. She was the national champ. First time at 13, youngest ever. So at age 13, she wins the national title. Age 14, she wins another national title. At age 16, she says, I've had it. She retires at 16. She unretires at 18. She wins the world championship at 19, and now she is the Olympic gold medalist at age 20. Who the heck knows what number 21 and 22 will be for her. But just remarkable class and grace. And again, lovely, just kind and sweet, and does every interview. It shows the kind of quality human beings that are out there in sports when we see, misbehavior and terrible things happening and recklessness and all the things that are out there with some pro athletes. There's so much good. And the Olympics in particular, I think, gives us that, because most of them are doing it for all the right reasons. I'm not saying NFL players or baseball players or Caitlin Clark. She's doing it for the right reason too, but they're making millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Olympians, yes, there's millions of dollars to be made for sure. And there's no doubt in my mind that Elia Malin and Alyssa Liu are millionaires. But there was no guarantee of that. There's no professional league necessarily. They're doing it for the love of the sport. And look at the result. And look at what we saw from those Milan Olympics. It was terrific. And I loved it. I just loved, and even with Elia, how devastating that was for him. The way he bounced back, the kindness, the grace, the way he looks you in the eye, answers every question, kind of lingers. Like any further, he doesn't say any more questions, but he doesn't walk away. The way so many pro athletes just can't wait to get out of there. He hangs around.
Which is the lesson we talk about a lot here on this podcast, which is it's not what happens to us, it's how we choose to respond to it. And having kids that, again, I don't remember whether he won or lost. I remember how he handled the composure that he had, or that she walked away from her sport and then had the wherewithal to say, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to pick the music. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. I'm going to wear my hair the way I want to hair. Like, for her to have that conviction of who she is and to know who she is. I mean, back to women, like, hell yeah, right? Like, that's what we want this next generation of girls to have, is a knowing, not a hoping or a wanting or am I enough, but a knowing of, yeah, I get to do this. And that was how she skated that whole time out there. You could tell, like, there was no fight or flight. There was just flow.
Oh yeah, no, and she's a terrific role model. For people out there who are parents or adults looking for role models. Obviously, there's tons of them. Caitlin Clark is great. She's better in person than you'd hope. She's just wonderful. As I say in the book, she's 22 going on 40 or 50, the way she handled everything, all the controversy and the pressure. Now she's 24, so she's 24 going on 40 or 50. She's that good and that fun and interesting and smart, and got her degree, of course, get that education. And then, but again, look at these Olympians. Look at Michaela Schifrin. Oh my gosh, the pressure on her. And still, fighting through her father's death, and then goes for the Olympics in 2022 in Beijing, just a disaster for her, and comes back and wins that gold in the slalom, which is just, razor's edge any moment. And even Lindsey Vonn, the most Lindsey Vonn thing Lindsey Vonn has ever done is going to do that. She had every right to do it. She knows her body. She knew what she was up against. But the brave, I think we're pretty hopefully past this, but for anyone to think a woman or girl can't do anything, right. I give you Alyssa Liu, as you just said, beautifully. I, give you Michaela Schifrin, Lindsey Vonn, Caitlin Clark, and so many other tops. Katie Ledecky, spectacular person, just great going for it. Now she's 29 now. She's going to the LA Olympics. I think she'll go to the Brisbane Olympics. Who knows? She hasn't said that, but I just know her well, and I think she will. It's just fantastic, the role models that are out there for girls and boys. And Caitlin makes that point. My last point for you on this one is, Caitlin Clark always talks about girls and boys. She doesn't exclude the boys. She signs autographs for the boys like the girls. Of course, she's all about mentoring girls and all about having Title IX and making sure that girls have opportunities. That's without a doubt. But she doesn't exclude the boys. And she's all about that. And the other day, after the first preseason game, she took off her shoes and signed them and gave them to a boy who was standing there. And his face, and again, that would never have happened in America, as you know, 20, 30 years ago. A father would have like, no, you're not going to watch women's sports. You're not going to be just agog, just absolutely in awe of a female athlete. Look at how far we've come as a country to see those kinds of changes. And I'm honored, absolutely honored to chronicle those for sure.
Yeah, the sweet story of her signing autographs and going past the little boy, and he was in tears, and then she caught wind of it and came back and signed the jersey. And again, wanting to inspire all. Her story is clearly still yet to be written. I mean, there's so much that she has yet to even, I'm sure, tapped into. But I loved how she handled Paris too. And that you have a whole chapter and on understanding, like, okay, she's the greatest that's ever played college basketball, and yet she doesn't get chosen, and all the controversy around that.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And I broke that story. The chapter's called The Olympic Snub. And not only we have the hardcover, but in a couple of days, actually, as we're talking, the paperback will be out as well of On Her Game with all new material. And
Great.
Yeah, 7,000 new words, so people can get that too, or go for that one as opposed to the hard, whatever. But yeah, the class and grace of just handling. Now, I do have in the book, as you know, where I talked to her coach at the time, and she said Caitlin was just ready to go, run through a brick wall, and was wanted to practice at like 1 in the morning. I mean, she was not happy at all with it,
Hmm.
but her public, and of course, why would she be? I mean, it was
Right.
just absolutely just the worst.
That's the competitor in her. That's like, I'm trick or treating. I'm going to go to every house before you do.
I'm
So
going to
what
win
do I
trick
need
or
to,
treat.
yeah,
That's what,
what
yeah.
do I, yeah, what do
Exactly.
I need to do to get on this team? I'll do it. Right.
And she should have been on the team. It's the having covered the Olympics as we know since 80,
Yeah.
as you've said, since 84, winter and summer. You know, she absolutely should have been on that team. It was the worst Olympic selection decision I have ever seen in all my years of covering the Olympics. It was just, and it looks worse every day. The pettiness, the jealousy, whatever it was, insane. Her stats were better than some people they took. And also, of course, she would have grown the game. Instead, TV ratings were worse, and the interest, and there were empty seats. I mean, it was just
And they took someone who was coming off an injury, who hadn't even been playing. You said, and then I was waiting for you to say, okay, it must have been an all male committee, and it wasn't. It was, I think, only one man was
yeah.
on the committee.
Women, yeah. Well, that goes back to, unfortunately, the kind of the negativity towards her from some
Huh.
women, especially women of color, towards a white woman. Even though I don't report specifically that, but there's no doubt we've seen it over and over again, and how the WNBA failed the players. And that's, of course, not what my words, but Harry Edwards, the great civil rights leader. Speaking of the Olympics, he was the man behind the Black Power salute at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, encouraging the two U.S. sprinters to raise their black gloved hands, in the very, racially charged and terrible 1968, the murders, assassinations of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and that was Harry Edwards. So his voice is in the book, talking about how the WNBA failed the players to prepare for this moment. They've never seen anything like Caitlin Clark. The attendance, the crowds, the people lined up outside as she's barnstorming the country like it's a Beyonce concert or Taylor Swift or Springsteen, and they're standing in line to watch a woman play basketball in January and February in the Big Ten in 20,000 seat arenas for hours to get in. Those are the opportunities, and that's the failure of that team to not understand it, and the WNBA to not be prepared for that, again, 74% black league. Harry Edwards says you should have had Zoom calls. You should have had, not because they're damsels in distress, but because they'd never dealt with anything like this before. So WNBA failed, according to Harry Edwards, according to me, and they're still, let's hope that they get it right. The season's about to begin. That's why the paperback is now out. And it's just, it's going to be fascinating to watch. We're also going to be doing a podcast. I'll be doing a podcast with USA Today on Caitlin Clark and the season that we'll be promoting very, very soon. And watching all of this unfold, because she is such an important person and such a great role model for girls and boys and people of color, not just white people, of course. And the thought that the WNBA has not handled this properly, well, as a journalist, I cover it all, no holds barred, no sugarcoating for sure. And I'll stay on top of all these stories, I promise, as she now goes into her third season.
The Fever were playing the Sparks here in LA last August, and she was injured. So, but my husband and I bought tickets, and I would say at least a quarter, maybe even closer to a third to a half, were wearing her jersey, and she wasn't even playing, but she was there on the floor, and the place was packed. And again, to your point, the Pied Piper, like, she's changing the game, and it's also now flowing. It was less than 4% of media coverage is on women's sports. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't know the exact stats. I know the Olympics,
Yeah.
it's more than 50%. That's
Now it is. Yeah. So now we're
sure.
starting to see some of that shift too. Okay, I need to let you go, but I'm going to leave you with the one question I love to ask everybody. I always get different answers. You can give me a word or a phrase or a whole paragraph, but how would you finish this statement? The best athletes I know do this.
The best athletes I know love it. They do it because they love it. If there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or more than one pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that's extra. They're not doing it for any reason other than this is their passion. They're good at it. They follow their hearts. They follow their dreams. And also that they're willing to work hard. no matter how talented those great athletes are, they are also the hardest workers. And whether that was Tiger Woods with all that talent, but you know, getting up at 5 in the morning to go hit golf balls before everybody else, to Katie Ledecky, just doing the laps, doing the miles in the pool with her head in the water every day, loving it, but doing it, the hard work. Whether it's athletes in my family that I've watched, and one in particular just being a great athlete in college, whatever it is, it's that passion combined with incredible hard work, knowing that as much as you love it and as good as you are, from Caitlin Clark and Tiger Woods and Tom Brady to, the weekend warrior, you're going to have to work super hard. And there's no secret. The secret to success is there's no secret to success, and it's the hard work that you're putting in with the talent that you have.
I find those that have the clearest why. If you know why you're doing it, then you don't mind the how. You're not caught up with if it means I need to work out 4 times a day. If it means I need to work out in the dark, I'll run through the wall, right, to get to the goal. And because it isn't about the outcome, it's about the process. It's about getting better. It's about challenging yourself. It's about leaning into the discomfort of, oh, you didn't put me on the 24 team? Great, I'll see you in LA.
Yes, I have a feeling as long as she's healthy, we will see Caitlin Clark in LA. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again.
Yeah. Good. I want to be there. I'm going to manifest that. Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much. Where can people pick up the book and find you and follow your great work?
Well, thanks, Kirsten. It's just great conversation. I love it. I love what you're doing, and it's such a wonderful thing and helpful, I'm sure, to so many people as they listen and watch you talk about these important issues in kids, young people's lives, for sure, and those that who love them. And so the book On Her Game is available basically wherever you get books. Obviously, Amazon. In fact, it's there. There you go. Quite a good price, I think, on Amazon right now. The paperback is available on May 5th, and so right as the season starts, it's the perfect companion for those to catch people up on what's been going on, including Caitlin's last year, including the injuries and so many other tidbits and breaking news in the paperback. And that's, again, available wherever independent bookstores. Always want that people to support them, but on Amazon and all the other online retailers too. So, and then the podcast on Caitlin Clark will be coming out soon that people can find it wherever, on YouTube and everywhere else. So those are a few of the things I'm up to right now. But thank you so much for the opportunity. I've loved this conversation.
Oh, well, and parents also download the Audible. It's Christine reading the book. And I always love hearing the author tell the story because you just hear your passion for it coming through, and it's beautifully read. And you're in the car with the kids going to the game. Like, it's so inspiring. So for parents who are raising athletes, this is the perfect book I just always would put things on in the car, and then you'd hear the kids later regurgitate facts to you. You're like, oh, you were listening. And they're like, yeah, actually, she's pretty cool. So it's a fun way that you get to experience it with them.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I'll tell you, it's a little grueling reading your book. I did it over 4 days. And you're gulping so much air as you're talking, that you end up, it's just a funny, but I love doing it. And thank you. And it is fun to do. And when my sister and brother-in-law were telling me they were listening in the car, and, it's like, okay, they weren't sick of my voice after all these years. So. There you go.
Yeah, it is challenging to do too. They're like, no, you have to retake that. Like, who wrote this sentence? Oh, I did. Why did I make it so long?
Yeah. That doesn't necessarily just trip off the tongue. Why? What?
Yeah. What was I thinking?
No, the good news was I was really quite. I was a little. When you're anyone reading out loud, anything, much less your book, and I just finished it because again, it was done very quickly to get it out as quickly as possible last year, hardcover, and of course now the paperback. And, and I was like, oh, okay, that turned out okay. I was a little like, oh, am I going to find a mistake or something wrong?
No.
Nope. And no one's complained about a thing in the book. There was a lot of controversy. People getting mad at me, that's what happens with journalism. Because I'm honest and truthful and will ask tough questions. And not one peep from anyone. So I feel great journalistically. I felt that was going to happen. And I'm so serious. Everything in the book is rock solid, 2-3 sources. If I don't have it for sure, like I would for a newspaper column or any of my journalism over the years, it's not in the book. So you're getting the true, real story of Caitlin, the WNBA, how they treated her, all the things, the issues, and also just the delight of Caitlin Clark, a complete jokester, very funny, and just a absolutely fun person to read about and get to know. So
Yeah.
hopefully that comes through with everyone, whether they're reading or listening to me.
Yeah, no, it comes through, and if you haven't fallen in love with her already, I think it does. It just shows, because you do such a great job of showing both sides of it. So you're like, oh, I can see their side too, which is great, so that you understand how we got to where we are, and that's what great journalism does. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for inspiring women like us to, we get to all help each other out. I believe 1 + 1 is 3. So thank you for taking the time to come into my world. And it's just been a pleasure to get to meet you and spend time with you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. And thanks so much, Kirsten. Really appreciate it.
All right. Pick up a copy of the book and follow along, and let's see what happens this season in the WNBA. It's going to be a fun one. You got this.